The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of Williams' Mercantile, and Beatrice Sullivan's fingers turned white as she gripped the worn leather bag containing everything she owned in this world, her heart hammering so hard she feared the other passengers might hear it. The Arizona Territory sun blazed mercilessly overhead as she stepped down from the coach, her traveling dress clinging uncomfortably after 3 weeks of dust and sweat. William sat nestled among the ponderosa pines at 7,000 feet elevation, the air thinner here than back in Philadelphia, where she'd boarded that first train heading west. September 1882 had proven unseasonably warm, and Beatrice felt perspiration trickling down her spine as she stood on the wooden sidewalk, searching the handful of weathered faces for one she'd recognize only from a single photograph. "Miss Sullivan." The voice came from behind her, deep and uncertain. She turned and found herself looking up into the bluest eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He was taller than she'd expected, broader through the shoulders, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. The photograph had shown a stern-faced man in his Sunday best, but this version wore dusty work clothes and held his hat awkwardly in his hands, turning it round and round by the brim. "Mr. Callahan." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Jesse Callahan." "Yes, madam." He nodded, those blue eyes studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." "It was long." She managed a trembling smile. "But I'm here now." "Yes," he cleared his throat. "Yes, you are." An awkward silence stretched between them before he seemed to remember himself. "Let me get your trunk. I have the wagon just down the street." Beatrice watched him stride toward the stagecoach driver, his movements efficient and confident in a way she'd never managed to be. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. What had she done? Traveled 2,000 miles to marry a complete stranger because her sister's husband had made it clear there was no longer room for her in their Philadelphia home after her father died. The advertisement had seemed like Providence at the time, a rancher in the Arizona Territory seeking a wife, promising a home and security. She'd written him 3 letters, received 2 in return, and based on that flimsy connection had uprooted her entire life. Jessie returned with her battered trunk hoisted easily on one shoulder. "The wagon's this way." He gestured with his free hand. She followed him down the wooden sidewalk, acutely aware of the curious stares from townspeople. Williams wasn't large, perhaps 300 souls, and a mail-order bride would be news worth noting. The wagon was hitched outside the saloon, 2 sturdy horses waiting patiently in the afternoon heat. Jessie loaded her trunk with care, then turned to help her up. When his calloused hand closed around hers, she felt her whole body stiffen. She'd never been comfortable with men touching her, not since her uncle had cornered her at her mother's funeral when she was 15. Though nothing terrible had happened, his whispered suggestions and wandering hands had left her wary of masculine attention. Jessie must have felt her tension because he released her hand almost immediately, his expression concerned. "Are you all right, Miss Sullivan?" "Fine." She forced the word out. "Just tired from the journey." He nodded slowly, clearly not believing her, but he didn't push. Instead, he offered his hand again, palm up, waiting. "I won't hurt you. I promise you that." Something in his quiet tone, the patience in his stance, made her try again. This time, when she placed her hand in his, she focused on breathing steadily. He helped her up to the wagon seat with a gentle efficiency, then climbed up beside her. The ride out to his ranch took nearly an hour, following a rutted road through pine forest and across open meadows where cattle grazed. Jesse pointed out landmarks as they went, his voice measured and calm. "That's the Peterson place to the north." Good neighbors, been here since '75. The mountains you see beyond are the San Francisco Peaks. The ranch is about 15 miles from town near Cataract Creek. He glanced at her. It's isolated. The nearest neighbor besides the Petersons is 6 miles south. I'm accustomed to solitude, Beatrice said softly. My father was a scholar. We spent most of our time in his study with his books. You read much? Interest sparked in Jesse's eyes. Constantly. Do you have books? He looked almost embarrassed. Some. My mother left a few when she passed. I'm not much for reading myself, but I can make out the words well enough. They fell into silence again, but it felt slightly less strained. Beatrice studied the landscape, so different from Pennsylvania's rolling green hills. Here everything seemed harder, sharper, painted in browns and deep greens under an impossibly blue sky. The air smelled of pine and dust, and something else she couldn't identify, something wild and untamed. The ranch house appeared suddenly as they crested a rise. It was larger than she'd expected, built of logs and stone with a wide porch wrapping around two sides. Outbuildings dotted the surrounding area, a barn, a chicken coop, what looked like a bunkhouse, and several smaller structures she couldn't identify. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and she could hear water running somewhere nearby. It's beautiful, she said, surprised to mean it. Jesse's whole face transformed when he smiled, years seeming to fall away. Thank you. My father built the main house in '69, right after he married my mother. I've added on over the years. He pulled the wagon to a stop near the porch and climbed down, then came around to help her. This time Beatrice was ready for the contact, though her hand still trembled slightly in his. When her feet touched solid ground, she swayed, exhaustion and anxiety finally catching up with her. Jesse's arm came around her shoulders, steadying her. Easy now. When did you last eat? Yesterday morning, I think. The world tilted alarmingly. Come on. His voice was gentle but firm. He kept his arm around her as he guided her up the porch steps and through the front door. The interior was dim after the bright sunlight, but as her eyes adjusted, Beatrice saw a large main room with a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture, and those promised books lining shelves along one wall. Everything was neat but clearly masculine, lacking the small touches a woman would add. Jesse steered her to a chair at the dining table. Sit. I'll get you something. She sank into the chair gratefully, watching as he moved around the kitchen area with practiced ease. Within minutes, he'd set before her a plate of cold chicken, bread, cheese, and a glass of cool water drawn from what must be a springhouse. Eat slowly, he advised, taking the chair across from her. Don't want you getting sick. Beatrice ate, acutely aware of his eyes on her. The food was simple but good, and she felt strength returning with each bite. When she'd finished, she finally met his gaze properly. Thank you. No need for thanks. Jesse leaned back in his chair. Miss Sullivan, I think we need to talk plainly about our situation. Her heart sank. He was already having second thoughts. She wasn't pretty enough, refined enough, something enough. But his next words surprised her. I can see you're scared. Of me, maybe, or just the situation. I want you to know that nothing has to happen right away. You can have the bedroom. I'll sleep in the spare room or the bunkhouse. We can take our time getting to know each other before we make anything official with the preacher. Relief flooded through her so intensely she felt tears prick her eyes. You do that. I didn't bring you all this way to make you miserable. His expression was earnest. I want a wife, yes, and eventually a family, but I want a partner who's here willingly, not someone who's terrified every time I come near. I'm sorry. She looked down at her hands. I don't mean to be afraid. You've been nothing but kind. Something happened to you. It wasn't a question. Beatrice swallowed hard. Nothing terrible, just enough to make me cautious. Jesse nodded slowly. Then we'll take it slow. I'm a patient man, Miss Sullivan. Beatrice, she said softly. If we're to be married, you should call me Beatrice. Beatrice. He tried out her name, and she liked the way it sounded in his deep voice. Then you should call me Jesse. Over the next few days, they established a careful routine. Jesse gave Beatrice the main bedroom, a comfortable space with a real mattress and windows overlooking the creek. He moved his things to the smaller room without complaint. He rose before dawn to tend the cattle and horses, and she would wake to find the fire already lit and coffee brewing. She took over the cooking, grateful to have a purpose, and discovered that Jesse had simple tastes but appreciated good food. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in impossible shades of orange and purple. Jesse would tell her about the ranch, his plans for expanding the herd, the challenges of water rights and winter weather. Beatrice would share stories from her childhood, carefully edited versions that left out the harder parts. On the fourth day, Jesse asked if she'd like to learn to ride. I've never been on a horse, Beatrice admitted, eyeing the mare he'd led from the barn with apprehension. Daisy here is gentle as they come. Jesse patted the horse's neck affectionately. She'll take care of you. I don't know. Beatrice twisted her hands together. Jesse moved to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Beatrice, out here, you need to know how to ride. If something happens and you need to get to town or to the neighbors, I need to know you can do it. The practical reasoning made sense, but fear still held her frozen. Jesse seemed to understand. He held out his hand, palm up, just as he had that first day. Trust me. Beatrice looked at his hand, work roughened and strong, then up at his face. Over the past few days, she'd learned to read his expressions. Right now, he was worried about her but trying not to show it, giving her space to make her own choice. Slowly, she placed her hand in his fingers closed around hers, warm and secure. Good. Now, come meet Daisy properly. He led her to the mare's side, guiding her hand to stroke the horse's neck. Daisy turned her head, regarding Beatrice with liquid brown eyes that held no threat, only mild curiosity. See, she likes you. Jesse's voice was warm with approval. Over the next hour, he taught her how to approach a horse, how to read their body language, the basics of mounting and sitting properly in the saddle. He never rushed her, never showed impatience when she hesitated or asked him to explain something again. And he kept physical contact to the minimum necessary, always warning her before he touched her to adjust her position or help her mount. By the time the lesson ended, Beatrice had managed to ride Daisy in a slow circle around the yard, and she felt a fierce pride in the accomplishment. You did well, Jesse said as he helped her down. This time when her feet hit the ground and she stumbled slightly from stiff legs, she didn't tense when he steadied her. Tomorrow we'll go a bit further. That night, as Beatrice lay in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, she realized something had shifted. The constant knot of anxiety in her chest had loosened slightly. Jesse's patience, his understanding, the way he consistently proved himself trustworthy, was gradually wearing down her defenses. The next morning brought visitors. Beatrice was kneading bread dough when she heard the sound of an approaching wagon. She glanced out the window to see a sturdy wagon pulled by a matched team, a woman in a blue dress holding the reins. Jesse appeared from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants as he walked to greet the newcomers. The woman climbed down without assistance, calling out something that made Jesse laugh. Behind her, 2 children tumbled from the wagon bed, a boy of perhaps 10 and a girl a few years younger. Beatrice quickly wiped the flour from her hands and smoothed her hair, anxiety returning in a rush. She hadn't expected to meet anyone yet, wasn't ready to explain her presence or face the inevitable questions. But Jesse was already leading the woman toward the house, and there was no escape. Beatrice forced herself to stand still as they entered. "Beatrice, this is Margaret Peterson, my nearest neighbor to the north. Margaret, this is Beatrice Sullivan, my intended wife." Margaret was in her 30s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She sized up Beatrice in one quick glance, then smiled warmly. "Welcome to the territory. I hope Jesse has been treating you well." "Very well, madam." Beatrice relaxed slightly at the genuine warmth in the woman's voice. "None of that madam business. I'm Margaret." She glanced around the kitchen, taking in the bread dough and the pot of soup simmering on the stove. "I came by to meet you and to invite you both to supper tomorrow evening. Give you a chance to meet some other folks." "That's kind of you," Beatrice began, but Margaret waved off her thanks. "Kindness nothing. We're neighbors, and neighbors look after each other out here." She fixed Jesse with a meaningful look. "You've got yourself a mail-order bride, Jesse Callahan, and the whole town's been speculating about when you'd bring her around. Best get it over with so people can satisfy their curiosity and move on to other gossip." Jesse actually looked uncomfortable. "I wanted to give Beatrice time to settle in first." "Admirable, but she won't truly settle until she knows her neighbors." Margaret turned back to Beatrice. "These are my children, Thomas and Sarah. Say hello, children." The two youngsters had been hovering in the doorway, staring at Beatrice with open curiosity. Now they stepped forward, offering polite greetings. Beatrice found herself smiling at their earnest faces. "Would you like some cookies?" she offered. "I made them yesterday." The children's eyes lit up, and after a nod from their mother, they accepted the offered treats. Margaret settled at the table, and soon she and Beatrice were chatting about the territory, the upcoming winter, and the peculiarities of high-altitude baking. Jesse excused himself to speak with Thomas about a new colt in the barn, leaving the women alone. "He's a good man," Margaret said quietly once the men had left. "Jesse, I mean. Known him since he was a boy. His father was hard on him, expected perfection, but Jesse turned out decent despite it all. Or maybe because of it, who can say? He's been very patient with me." Beatrice surprised herself by confiding. "Scared of the unknown?" Margaret's eyes were understanding. "Or scared of men in general?" Beatrice's silence was answer enough. Margaret reached across the table and patted her hand gently. "Whatever your reasons, you landed with the right man. Jesse won't push you, won't force anything. Give yourself time and give him a chance. I think you'll find you made a good choice coming here." After the Petersons left, with promises to see them the following evening, Beatrice found herself thinking about Margaret's words. She was still thinking about them that evening when Jesse suggested another riding lesson. This time she approached Daisy with more confidence, accepting Jesse's help to mount without hesitation. They rode together out toward the creek, Jesse on his gelding beside her, pointing out landmarks and wildlife. A hawk circled overhead. Deer watched them from the tree line with liquid eyes before bounding away. "It's peaceful here," Beatrice said, surprising herself with the observation. "It is." Jesse smiled at her. "I thought you might like it, away from city crowds and noise." "How did you know I didn't like crowds?" "Your letters. You mentioned preferring your father's study to social events." He paused. "I'm similar. Never been comfortable with a lot of people around. Out here I can breathe." It was the most personal thing he'd shared, and Beatrice felt something warm unfold in her chest. "Yes. That's exactly it. I can breathe here." Their eyes met, and for the first time Beatrice didn't look away. She saw recognition there, a sense that perhaps they understood each other in ways she hadn't expected. The moment stretched between them, comfortable and charged at once. Jesse cleared his throat. "We should head back. Don't want you getting too tired." But as they rode back to the ranch house, Beatrice realized her fear was transforming into something else. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of trust. And trust, she was learning, was perhaps more important. The supper at the Peterson Ranch the following evening tested Beatrice's newfound confidence. Besides Margaret and her husband, Robert, 3 other families had been invited. The small house was full of noise and laughter, children running underfoot while the women set out food, and the men discussed cattle prices and weather predictions. Beatrice found herself overwhelmed by the chaos, seeking refuge on the porch under the pretext of needing air. She'd been out there only a few minutes when Jesse appeared beside her. "Too much?" he asked quietly. "I'm not used to it." She wrapped her arms around herself despite the warm evening. "So many people all at once. We can leave if you want." She shook her head. "No, Margaret went to trouble. And everyone's been kind." She glanced at him. "I'm just not good at this." "At what?" "Being around people, making conversation, all the things women are supposed to be good at." Her voice held a hint of bitterness. "My sister was always the charming one. I was the odd one who preferred books to people." Jesse leaned against the porch railing, his expression thoughtful. "Nothing wrong with preferring books, and you don't need to be charming, just be yourself." "What if myself isn't enough? Then these people aren't worth knowing." His certainty surprised her. "But I think you'll find folks out here appreciate honesty more than charm." Before she could respond, Margaret appeared in the doorway. "There you are. Beatrice, I need another pair of hands in the kitchen if you're willing." Beatrice followed her inside, where Margaret put her to work slicing bread while the other women arranged dishes on the long table. To her surprise, she found the task soothing. The women's chatter washed over her, requiring little participation, just occasional nods or brief responses. An older woman named Elizabeth, wife to a rancher named Samuel Crawford, seemed to sense Beatrice's discomfort and went out of her way to include her without overwhelming her. "How are you finding the territory?" she asked as they worked side by side. "Different from Philadelphia, but beautiful in its own way. It grows on you." Elizabeth smiled. "I came from Boston 30 years ago, thought I'd made the worst mistake of my life. Now I can't imagine living anywhere else." "Did you come as a mail-order bride too?" "I did. Samuel's first wife died in childbirth, left him with a baby son and no idea how to manage. I was a widow back east, no children, no prospects. We started practical and grew into love." She gave Beatrice a knowing look. "Jesse is a good man, give it time." Supper was a boisterous affair, everyone talking at once, passing dishes, laughing at shared jokes. Beatrice sat beside Jesse, acutely aware of his solid presence. He didn't push her to participate in conversations, but occasionally he'd lean close to explain who someone was or provide context for a story. Each time, she felt the warmth of his breath against her ear, caught the scent of soap and leather, and found it less frightening than she'd expected. On the ride home under a sky brilliant with stars, Jesse broke the comfortable silence. "You did well tonight. I hardly said 10 words. You were there, you tried. That's what matters." He glanced at her. "And I saw you smiling when Thomas told that story about the runaway pig." She had been smiling, she realized. Despite her anxiety, there had been moments of genuine enjoyment. Everyone was kind. They liked you. "How can you tell?" Elizabeth invited you to her quilting circle. Margaret asked if you'd help with the church social next month. "Those aren't obligations, Beatrice. They're invitations to friendship." She pondered this as the wagon rolled through the darkness, the horses knowing their way home. "Jesse, can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you want a mail-order bride? You're well-established, respected." Surely there were women here who would have been interested. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, He spoke. "I told you my father was hard on me. What I didn't say was that he chose a woman for me to marry, a rancher's daughter from New Mexico. She was beautiful and accomplished, everything a man could want. But she wanted nothing to do with ranch life. She wanted fancy dresses and city living. We courted because our fathers pushed it, and I could see how miserable she was every time she visited the ranch. What happened? I ended it. Told my father I wouldn't marry someone who'd hate her life with me. He died angry about it, said I was throwing away a good match." Jesse's hands tightened on the reins. "After that, I figured I'd choose for myself. But the local women, they see the ranch, the success. They don't see me. So I thought maybe someone from far away, someone looking for a new start, might be willing to build something real. No pretenses, no expectations beyond what we agree on together. You want honesty. I want a partner. Someone who'll share this life because they want to, not because they are obligated or dazzled by what they think they'll get." He looked at her directly. "Your letters were honest, Beatrice. You didn't pretend to be something you're not. You said you wanted security and a quiet life, that you'd work hard and be a faithful wife. No false promises of love or devotion, just truth. That meant more to me than any amount of charm would have." Beatrice felt something shift in her chest, a wall crumbling. "I'm glad I came here." "Yeah." His voice held hope. "Yeah." The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. Beatrice took over more of the household tasks, finding satisfaction in maintaining the home. She learned to bake at high altitude, fought and won battles against stubborn stains, and discovered she had a knack for herb gardening in the small plot behind the house. Jesse taught her to ride with increasing confidence, and soon they were taking longer trips around the ranch, checking on cattle and fences together. She accompanied him to town for supplies, meeting more of the community. Williams was small enough that everyone knew everyone, and while there was initial curiosity about the mail-order bride, people quickly accepted her. The mercantile owner's wife, Deanna, took Beatrice under her wing, introducing her to other women and filling her in on the town's social dynamics. Through it all, Jesse remained patient, giving her space but also creating opportunities for them to grow closer. He never pushed physical intimacy beyond helping her on and off her horse or offering his arm when they walked together. But there were moments when their hands would brush and neither would pull away, or when their eyes would meet across the dinner table and hold just a bit longer than necessary. One evening in early October, after a particularly beautiful sunset, they sat on the porch in comfortable silence. Beatrice had brought out her mending and Jesse was working on a piece of leather tack that needed repair. It was domestic and peaceful, and Beatrice realized with a start that she was happy. "Jesse," she said softly, I think I'm ready." He looked up from his work, confused. "Ready for what?" "To make this official, to actually get married, not just be engaged." Her heart hammered, but she forced herself to continue. "If you still want to, that is." Jesse set down his work carefully, giving her his full attention. "Are you sure? There's no rush, I'm sure." And she was, she realized. The fear that had gripped her when she first arrived had faded, replaced by a quiet certainty that this man, this life, was right for her. "You've been so patient with me, so kind. I want to be your wife properly. Beatrice." He reached for her hand, and she gave it willingly. "I'd be honored." They married the following Sunday in William's small church, with Margaret and Robert standing as witnesses. Beatrice wore a simple blue dress she'd brought from Philadelphia, and Jesse wore his good suit, the same one from the photograph. Reverend Thompson performed the ceremony, his voice booming in the small sanctuary. When Jesse lifted her veil to kiss her, Beatrice felt her heart flutter with nervousness, but his lips were gentle against hers. the kiss brief and chaste but filled with promise. The town threw together an impromptu celebration at the hotel, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible for such short notice. Beatrice found herself passed from partner to partner as various men claimed dances, always under Jesse's watchful eye. But it was her dance with her new husband that mattered most. Jesse wasn't a graceful dancer, but he was confident, guiding her around the floor with steady assurance. "Happy?" he asked quietly. Surprisingly, yes, she smiled up at him. "I didn't think I would be, but I am. Good." His arm tightened slightly around her waist. "I'm going to do everything I can to keep you happy, Beatrice." "I know." They left the celebration as the sun began to set, riding back to the ranch in the wagon. Beatrice felt nervous anticipation building as they drew closer to home. This was their wedding night, and expectations came with that. But when they arrived, Jesse surprised her. "I know today was traditional," he said as he helped her down from the wagon, "but I don't want you to feel obligated to anything tonight. We can keep things as they've been until you're ready for more, Jesse." She touched his face, the gesture surprising them both. "You've earned my trust. I'm ready." His eyes searched hers. "Are you certain?" "I'm certain." He took her hand and led her inside, up to the bedroom they would now share. What followed was tender and patient, Jesse taking his time, making sure she was comfortable at every step. He treated her like something precious, and when it was over, Beatrice lay in his arms feeling safe and cherished in a way she never had before. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For what?" His hand stroked through her hair gently. "For being patient, for giving me time. For not pushing. You're my wife, Beatrice. Your happiness matters more than anything else." He kissed the top of her head. "Rest now." She drifted to sleep, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, and for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she felt truly at home. The next months brought changes both subtle and profound. As autumn deepened into winter, Beatrice learned the rhythms of ranch life. She helped Jesse with feeding when the snow came, bundled in layers of wool and fur. She learned to read weather signs, to know when a storm was coming by the way the cattle behaved or the color of the clouds. She became proficient at horseback riding, able to accompany Jesse on longer trips to check distant pastures. But more than the practical skills, she discovered aspects of herself she hadn't known existed. She was stronger than she'd thought, both physically and emotionally. The solitary life suited her, but she also found she enjoyed the occasional social gatherings, especially the quilting circle Elizabeth had invited her to. The women met weekly, and their friendship filled a space Beatrice hadn't realized was empty. Her relationship with Jesse deepened with each passing day. They learned each other's habits and preferences, the small intimacies that built a marriage. She discovered he liked his coffee strong and black, that he hummed when he thought no one was listening, that he had nightmares sometimes about his father and needed her arms around him until he settled. He learned that she read late into the night if a book captured her attention, that she was ticklish behind her left knee, that thunderstorms made her anxious, but she was too proud to admit it without prompting. They grew into partnership, then friendship, and finally into love. It wasn't the dramatic passion of dime novels, but something quieter and more enduring. It was Jesse riding 3 hours to Williams in a snowstorm because she'd mentioned craving peppermint candy. It was Beatrice learning to play chess so they'd have something to do during long winter evenings. It was 1,000 small kindnesses and compromises that wove their lives together into something stronger than either had been alone. Spring came late to the high country, but when it finally arrived, it transformed the landscape. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows and the creek ran high with snowmelt. Beatrice planted a larger garden, ambitious in her plans for vegetables and herbs. Jesse expanded the herd, bringing in new breeding stock from California. One morning in April, Beatrice woke feeling queasy. She made it outside before being sick, and when she returned, pale and shaking, Jesse was waiting with concern written across his face. "I'm fine," she assured him. "Just something I ate." But when it happened again the next morning and the morning after that, she began to suspect the truth. Margaret confirmed it when Beatrice confided in her at the next quilting circle. "You're pregnant, dear." Margaret's smile was warm. "How wonderful." "I'm terrified," Beatrice admitted. "My mother died in childbirth. What if I do too? Look at me." Margaret gripped her hands firmly. "That's fear talking. Yes, childbirth is dangerous, but you're young and healthy, and we have good women here who know what they're doing. Elizabeth has delivered half the babies in this territory. You'll be fine, and you'll have a beautiful baby come fall." Beatrice told Jesse that evening as they sat watching the sunset. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. Joy lit his face, followed immediately by concern. "Are you happy about it?" he asked carefully. "I know we hadn't discussed when we wanted children." "I'm scared," she admitted. "But yes, I'm happy." "Are you, Beatrice?" He pulled her close. "I'm more than happy. I'm grateful. You've given me so much already, and now this. A family of our own. I need you to promise me something." She looked up at him seriously. "If something goes wrong during the birth, if there's a choice to be made, you choose me. The baby is important, but I need to know you'll choose me. Nothing's going to happen to you." But when she remained silent, waiting, he nodded reluctantly. "I promise, but it won't come to that." The pregnancy progressed through summer. Beatrice remained active, working in her garden and helping Jesse when she could, though he increasingly insisted she take it easy. The baby was due in November, and as the date approached, Beatrice's anxiety grew despite everyone's reassurances. Elizabeth came to stay at the ranch in mid-November, setting up in the spare room. "First babies are rarely on time," she informed them, "and labor can last a while. Better I'm here already than trying to get here in a rush." She was right. The labor began on a cold November evening and continued through the night and into the next day. Jesse stayed by Beatrice's side through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. When she screamed that she couldn't do it anymore, that it was too much, he was there telling her she was strong enough, that he believed in her. Finally, as afternoon light slanted through the bedroom window, their son was born. He came into the world red-faced and squalling, perfectly healthy and astonishingly beautiful. Elizabeth cleaned him and wrapped him in soft flannel before placing him in Beatrice's arms. "You did it," Jesse whispered, staring at his son with wonder. "You're both perfect. What should we name him?" Beatrice asked, exhausted but euphoric. "James." Jesse touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "After your father, if that's all right." Tears slipped down Beatrice's cheeks. "That's perfect." Little James Callahan proved to be a good baby, eating well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Beatrice recovered from the birth more quickly than expected, and soon the household had adjusted to the rhythms of infant care. Jesse proved to be a devoted father, taking his turns walking the floor when James fussed, changing diapers without complaint, staring at his son with an expression of awed love that made Beatrice fall even deeper in love with her husband. Winter was hard that year, with heavy snows that isolated them for weeks at a time. But Beatrice didn't mind. The three of them, safe and warm in their home, felt like all the family she needed. Jesse would read to her from the newspaper whenever he managed to get to town for supplies, keeping her informed of the outside world. They played chess and taught James to smile and watch the snow pile higher outside the windows. Spring brought Beatrice's second pregnancy, a surprise but a welcome one. Irish twins, Margaret laughed when told the news. They'll be close as can be. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Beatrice knew what to expect. Their daughter, Emma, was born in September of 1884 during an early autumn heat wave. She had Jesse's blue eyes and dark hair, and she was temperamentally the opposite of her brother, fussy and particular from her first breath. "She knows what she wants," Jesse said fondly, walking the floor at midnight with his daughter tucked against his shoulder. "Can't fault her for that." The ranch prospered over the next years. Jesse's careful management and willingness to adopt new breeding techniques paid off, and their herd became known for quality throughout the territory. They hired a hand to help with the work, a young man named Tom Morris, who proved reliable and hardworking. With help, Jesse had more time to spend with his family, and he used it well, teaching James to ride before the boy was 4, taking Beatrice and the children on picnics by the creek, building Emma a dollhouse with his own hands. Life wasn't without challenges. There were droughts and hard winters, years when cattle prices dropped and money was tight. But they weathered it together, Beatrice managing their budget carefully, Jesse working from dawn to dusk. The children grew, James into a sturdy, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, Emma into a willful little girl who ruled the household with her charm. In 1887, Beatrice's sister wrote from Philadelphia. Their uncle had died, leaving Beatrice a small inheritance. The letter also carried news that Beatrice's sister was struggling. Her husband's business had failed, and they were facing poverty. "What do you want to do?" Jesse asked after she'd read him the letter. "I want to use the inheritance to help her," Beatrice said slowly. "But I also want to invite her to come here if she needs to. Is that all right?" "This is your home," Jesse said firmly. "Your family is welcome here. Besides, the children should know their aunt." Beatrice's sister declined the invitation but accepted the financial help gratefully. In her return letter, she apologized for how she'd treated Beatrice after their father's death, admitted she'd been wrong to pressure her to leave. The reconciliation wasn't complete. The distance between them was too great, but it mended something in Beatrice's heart that had been broken. As the 1880s drew to a close, the Arizona Territory was changing. The railroad had brought more people, more commerce, more connection to the wider world. Williams grew from a small settlement to a proper town with a new school and church. Jesse was asked to join the town council, a recognition of his standing in the community. "What do you think?" he asked Beatrice. "It would mean more time away from the ranch, more responsibility." "I think you'd be good at it," she said honestly. "You care about this place and the people here. And Tom's proven he can handle things when you're not here." So Jesse joined the council, and Beatrice found herself more involved in town life as well. She started a lending library, using her father's books as the foundation and soliciting donations from others. It was small, meeting in a corner of the church, but it served the community's need. Children came to hear her read on Saturday mornings, and adults borrowed books to get through long winter evenings. In 1890, Beatrice gave birth to their third child, another son they named Daniel. He was an easy baby, content and smiling, and at 8 years old, James took his role as big brother seriously, while 6-year-old Emma was less impressed with the infant who disrupted her household. "She'll come around," Jesse assured Beatrice when Emma refused to hold the baby. "She just needs time to adjust." He was right. Within a month, Emma had claimed Daniel as her personal responsibility, insisting on helping with his care and running to get Beatrice whenever he cried. The children grew, and Beatrice marveled at how quickly time passed. James started school, proving to be a good student with his mother's love of reading. Emma followed 2 years later, charming her teacher while driving her mother to distraction with her stubborn independence. Daniel toddled after his siblings, determined to keep up despite his shorter legs. In 1893, Jesse's ranch received recognition at the Territorial Fair for having the finest breeding stock in northern Arizona. It was an honor he'd worked toward for years, and the whole family made the trip to Phoenix to see him receive the award. Beatrice stood with their children, watching her husband accept recognition from the territorial governor, and felt such pride she thought her heart might burst. That night in their hotel room, after the children were asleep in the adjoining room, Jesse pulled Beatrice close. "None of this would have been possible without you," he said quietly. "You know that, right? You built this ranch," she protested. "I just helped. You made it a home. You gave me a family. You stood beside me through droughts and hard winters and all the rest." He tilted her face up to meet his eyes. "That day you stepped off the stagecoach, I saw how scared you were. I wasn't sure this would work, but you were brave enough to try and strong enough to stay. Everything good in my life comes from that choice you made." "I was terrified," she admitted. "I almost got back on the stagecoach, but then you held my hand and something told me I'd be safe with you. I wasn't wrong." "I love you, Beatrice." He said it simply, but she heard the depth of feeling behind the words. "I love you too." And she did, more than she'd thought possible that day in 1882, when she'd arrived in Williams with nothing but a worn bag and desperate hope. They returned to the ranch to find everything running smoothly under Tom's management. He'd been courting a girl from town, and that fall, he and Sarah Martin were married in the Williams church. Jesse offered to build them a small house on ranch land, and Tom accepted, grateful for the opportunity. It meant the ranch had a permanent foreman, someone Jesse trusted completely, which gave him more flexibility as his council responsibilities grew. The new century arrived with celebration and speculation about what changes it would bring. James was now 17, a young man helping his father run the ranch. He'd grown tall and strong, with Jesse's blue eyes and Beatrice's thoughtful nature. Emma at 15 was beautiful and knew it. Collecting suitors despite her parents' insistence, she was too young for serious courting. Daniel at 10 was still finding his way, more interested in books than ranching, which amused his parents given how similar he was to Beatrice in that regard. In 1902, Arizona Territory was moving closer to statehood, and Jesse was increasingly involved in the political discussions. He traveled to Phoenix several times that year, and Beatrice accompanied him when she could, leaving the ranch in Tom's capable hands and the children under Emma's supervision, though that made everyone nervous. "I'm responsible," Emma insisted when her parents expressed concern about leaving her in charge. "You're responsible when it suits you," Beatrice countered. "But you follow your own rules, Emma, and that worries me." In the end, it worked out fine. Emma kept the household running, made sure Daniel got to school, and even managed to have supper ready when her parents returned. She preened under their praise, and Beatrice shared a look with Jesse that said clearly, they'd gotten lucky this time. James announced his intention to marry in 1903. The girl was Susan Patterson, daughter of a rancher to the south, and she was a sweet, hard-working young woman who Beatrice approved of immediately. They married in a ceremony that brought together families from across the territory, and Jesse built them a house on ranch land not far from Tom and Sarah's place. The ranch was becoming a small community of its own. Emma surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to attend the new teachers' college opening in Flagstaff. "I want to teach," she declared. "I'm good with children and I love learning. Why shouldn't I?" "It's far from home," Jesse said carefully, "and you're only 18. "Mama was 18 when she traveled from Philadelphia," Emma pointed out, At least Flagstaff is only 60 miles away. Beatrice and Jesse discussed it late into the night. Finally, they agreed, partly because Emma was determined and would find a way regardless, and partly because they recognized her need for independence. She left for school that fall, and the house felt empty without her vibrant presence. Daniel continued his studies, showing academic promise that delighted Beatrice. He talked about perhaps becoming a lawyer or teacher, ambitions far removed from ranching but no less valuable. Jesse supported his son's dreams, even as he relied more heavily on James to help run the ranch. In 1905, James and Susan welcomed Jesse and Beatrice's first grandchild, a daughter they named Beatrice after her grandmother. Holding her namesake, Beatrice felt the circle complete. She'd come to the Arizona Territory as a frightened young woman with nowhere else to go, and now she held her granddaughter in a home filled with love and surrounded by family. "What are you thinking?" Jesse asked, watching her with the baby. "I'm thinking how different everything turned out from what I expected." She smiled at him. "How much better?" Emma graduated from Teachers College and took a position in Williams, teaching at the school she'd once attended. She boarded with the Martins in town during the week and came home on weekends, filling the house with stories about her students and complaints about the school board. Daniel followed his dream to Phoenix, attending law school and sending long letters home describing his studies and the city. Jesse missed having him at the ranch but was proud of his son's accomplishments. The years continued to pass, marked by births and deaths, celebrations and sorrows. Tom and Sarah had 4 children who grew up playing with James and Susan's growing family. Emma eventually married a teacher she met at a state education conference, a kind man named Paul who understood her independent nature. They settled in Williams, and Emma continued teaching for several years before their own children arrived. Daniel passed the bar examination and opened a practice in Phoenix, eventually entering politics himself. He married a doctor's daughter and brought her home to meet his parents, a confident young woman named Helen, who impressed everyone with her intelligence and warmth. Through it all, Jesse and Beatrice remained the center of an ever-expanding family. The ranch continued to prosper, adapted now to modern ranching methods while maintaining the quality that had made it respected throughout the territory. When Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, Jesse was 63 and Beatrice was 55. They stood together watching the flag with 48 stars fly for the first time over Williams, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and friends. "We made it," Jesse said quietly, taking her hand just as he had that first day in 1882. "We did." She squeezed his fingers. "We really did." As they grew older, they gradually stepped back from the most demanding work. James took over primary management of the ranch, proving to be as capable as his father. Jesse focused on his grandchildren, teaching them to ride and fish, telling them stories about the old days. Beatrice continued her lending library, now housed in its own small building the town had constructed, and spent hours reading to her grandchildren just as she'd once read to her own children. In 1920, as the country was recovering from the Great War and adapting to new realities, Jesse and Beatrice celebrated their 38th wedding anniversary. The family gathered for a party at the ranch, 3 generations filling the expanded house and spilling out onto the porches and lawn. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and stories shared about the years past. As evening fell and the party wound down, Jesse and Beatrice found themselves alone on the porch where they'd spent so many evenings over the years. The stars were brilliant overhead, the air pine-scented and cool. "Do you ever regret it?" Jesse asked suddenly. Coming here, marrying me, Beatrice looked at him in surprise. Never, not once. Why would you ask that? You gave up a lot. Your home, your family, everything you knew. I gained so much more. She took his hand, noting how age had marked them both. His hands were more gnarled now, her own marked with spots and wrinkles, but their grip was still strong. I found home with you, Jesse. Found myself, really. That frightened girl who stepped off the stage coach, she didn't know who she was or what she was capable of. You gave me the space and support to find out. You did that yourself. His thumb rubbed across her knuckles in a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache with love. I just held your hand. You held my hand until I felt strong, she agreed. And then you kept holding it because you wanted to, not because I needed you to. That made all the difference. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars wheeled overhead, the sounds of their family settling in for the night, a distant, comforting murmur. They'd built something lasting here, something that would continue long after they were gone. The ranch, the family, the love that bound them all together, it was a legacy neither had imagined possible that day in 1882. I'd do it all again, Jesse said finally. Every moment, every choice, all of it. It brought me here to this, to you. So would I. Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder. So would I. As they sat there under the vast Arizona sky, surrounded by the life they'd built together, Beatrice thought about that terrified young woman who'd arrived in Williams with nothing but hope and desperation. She wished she could tell that girl what waited for her, that the fear was worth pushing through, that the risk of trusting this steady cowboy with kind eyes would pay off beyond her wildest dreams. But then again, maybe the not knowing had been necessary. Maybe stepping into the unknown, trembling but determined, was what had made her strong enough to build this life. And the cowboy who'd held her hand, who'd given her time and patience and unwavering support, had become the great love of her life. The Arizona territory had given her more than a home. It had given her family, purpose, and a love that had weathered decades. As she sat beside Jesse, their hands still intertwined, Beatrice felt nothing but gratitude for the courage she'd found to step off that stagecoach so many years ago. The night deepened around them, but they remained, content in the silence, in each other's presence, in the knowledge that they'd built something rare and precious. Their love story hadn't begun with passion or drama, but with patience and growing trust. And that foundation had proven strong enough to last a lifetime. In the years that followed, as age inevitably took its toll, they remained devoted to each other. Jesse's joints grew stiffer, Beatrice's eyesight dimmed, but they adapted together. He read to her when her eyes tired. She helped him with tasks that required more dexterity than his arthritic hands could manage. Their children and grandchildren visited often, the ranch remaining the heart of the family. In 1928, Jesse fell ill with pneumonia. Beatrice nursed him through it with the same fierce determination she'd brought to every challenge in their life together. He recovered, though more slowly than either liked, and afterward, they both understood their time was growing short. "No regrets," Jesse said one evening as they sat on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the spring chill. "No regrets," Beatrice agreed. They had years yet, precious time they didn't waste. They watched more grandchildren arrive, celebrated more milestones, continued to be the anchors their family depended on. They took shorter walks now, spent more time in comfortable chairs, but the quality of their connection never diminished. In 1935, on a summer evening much like the one when they'd celebrated their 38th anniversary, Jesse passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 76 years old and had lived a good life, but Beatrice felt the loss like a physical wound. After 53 years together, his absence was profound. The family gathered for the funeral, supporting Beatrice through her grief. But as she stood beside his grave in the Williams Cemetery, looking out over the land they'd worked together, the mountains they'd watched change through the seasons, she felt grateful more than bereft. They'd had more time than most, more happiness than many. He'd given her a life beyond anything she could have imagined. She lived another 7 years, staying active and involved in her family's lives. She finally got to see Daniel argue a case before the state's Supreme Court, watched Emma's children graduate from university, held great-grandchildren in her arms. The ranch remained in family hands, James managing it with the same care his father had shown. In 1942, as another war raged in the distance, Beatrice passed away at 82. She died in the home she and Jesse had shared, surrounded by her children, at peace with the life she'd lived. Her last words were about Jesse, about how she'd see him soon, how she'd missed holding his hand. They buried her beside him in the Williams Cemetery, under the pines and the vast Arizona sky. The headstone was simple, bearing their names and dates and an inscription chosen by their children that seemed to sum up their remarkable love story. Together they built a life, a family, and a love that endures. And it did endure. The ranch continued to operate, passed down through generations. The library Beatrice had founded grew into a proper town institution. Their descendants spread throughout Arizona and beyond, carrying forward the values Jesse and Beatrice had instilled: hard work, honesty, patience, and love. The story of the mail-order bride who'd arrived trembling in 1882, and the cowboy who'd held her hand until she felt strong became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a reminder that love could grow from the smallest beginnings, that patience and trust could build something lasting, that courage came in many forms. Beatrice had stepped into Jesse's world, unsure of everything except her need for a new beginning. He'd given her time, space, and unwavering support. Together, they'd built not just a marriage but a partnership, not just a family but a legacy. Their love hadn't been the dramatic passion of stories, but something quieter and more profound. A steady flame that had burned bright through decades of life lived together. And in the end, that was the greatest love story of all.